To be talking about something that is also very important to the program in a number of different ways. And so that is CVE Record Enrichment and what it is and where we are right now with it. And a thank you to those that are already doing it. I do want to give a quick shout out to Lisa, who has a talk tomorrow, and she's going to provide some really great information, more detail, more insight, more information around enrichment from a Microsoft perspective tomorrow. So be sure to be there. My name's Alec Summers. I am the CVE and CWE project leads here at MITRE. So what is CVE Record Enrichment? I know Kent talked a little bit about this, but generally speaking, as the CVE program has evolved and the CVE record has evolved, additional vulnerability-related information has also become important to the community around things like incident response, understanding root causes around vulnerabilities, and increased transparency. And there's a couple of these versions that we know and love, perhaps in different ways, on the screen here. So CVSS as a form of scoring for prioritization, CWE as a form of root cause mapping understanding, and CPE being one example that relates to software identity. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. So looking forward to that as well. But enrichment really means providing this kind of information directly into the CVE record itself. In addition to things like the ID itself, the description, and a public reference to refer for that CVE ID. Why it's important. What this really can do is increase the value of the CVE record, right? It can be create the CVE record being, in a way, a one-stop shop for kind of the vital information that you need. Now, not every information element necessarily needs to be within the CVE record itself. But as Kent was talking about, the record itself has evolved to be a structured format to provide an opportunity for CNAs to provide a lot of valuable information directly into the record themselves. And more accurate and precise and timely information, for example, right when the record is, when the disclosure takes place, really helps defenders and downstream customers better address risks. As we all know that time is an important aspect of that. And the more information is provided at the beginning, the easier that is. And lastly, as I mentioned before, the identifiable benefit information that can come from these other, information around scoring and weakness mapping and other things like that really help the CVE record as a one-stop shop for vulnerability information. But who should do it, right? Historically, the CVE record enrichment has been performed by downstream consumers, right? So for example, the NVD historically had provided CVSS scores, CWE mappings. There's other people that, take the CVE record and provide their own information. Sometimes those are added, sometimes articles, and other references are added to the CVE record after the fact to provide information, which is valuable, no doubt. But these were provided obviously by informed, I should say, by interpreting publicly available resources, right? So when the NVD was doing things like CVSS scoring, they're looking at whatever they have access to from a public available perspective and trying to interpret and very often, question, for example, what scoring might something be versus what somebody else might think it be. What we know and what we stand by from the CVE program perspective is that we know that most CNAs, and I say most just a caveat around things like the CNALR, product supplier CNAs are really the best positioned to provide enrichment information. And why is that? Well, they are fundamentally the authoritative source for vulnerability information within their CNA scope. They're the closest to the products themselves. They have access to the most reliable source of information and data to make accurate determinations around these things, right? And what we know, too, is that this information is really helpful to have when it's first disclosed because it can be added directly into the CVE record, now on the website as well, not just in the data format. So I wanted to put this on here for those that maybe hadn't had a chance to take a look. If you go to a CVE record, you can see the prominent, most, let's say top level information about the CVE record comes directly from the CNA. And Pete, you'll be happy I called out Red Hat here rather than Microsoft or Oracle. And you can see that the CWE is linked there, right? This is coming directly from the CNA. The CVSS score is coming there. You can see I sort of cut off at the bottom of the record as you scroll down on the site. What you'll see is additional information, for example, from the CVE program, right? When we talk about references, and we'll talk about these, I think, later today or tomorrow, where the CVE program adds references to its own container related to a record. And then, of course, we have ADPs recently launched, for example, that might add additional information. So I wanted to take a moment here and look at what we have seen in the current data, right? So with the idea that the CNA really is the best position to provide this information, the CVE program back in April launched an initiative and really sort of a communication campaign to say, hey, CNAs, the CVE record can support this additional information, and we encourage you to provide it because you don't have to wait for a downstream consumer to provide this information, right? To provide a CVSS score, provide a CWE. And some people already were, but not everybody. And so the idea was saying, hey, you guys are best positioned to do this, and now you can, right? The CVE record facilitates this. And so one of the things that we've been doing, the CVE program secretariat has been pulling CVE data on a biweekly basis. So every 2 weeks we pull the data and we look at throughout the CNA community, the adoption rates, right, of who is providing CVSS scores as a matter of routine within their records and CWEs, right? These two elements were sort of the first criteria for what we launched. I can't even remember now. It's been a couple of months, I think. The CNA Enrichment Recognition List. And really, this is just a really basic list that tracks the CNAs that are providing CVSS and CWE information 98% or more of the time for their CVE records within a 2-week period, right? So we know that, oh, wow, that's an incomplete sentence too. We know that the CVSS and CWE information is added to records when they're published, but not every CNA is publishing CVE records on the same clip, right? Sometimes people do them in chunks. Sometimes people have them sporadically. Others have more than others due to the nature of having more products, for example. And so what we do with the Enrichment Recognition List is recognize that fact by looking at the window around the most recent CVE record published by the CNA, and you get on the record, you get on the ERL, as we call it, if you are providing CVSS and CWE 98% of the time for all your records within that window of time frame. So looking at that in terms of detail, what we do is we track this sort of on a biweekly basis, right? But we sort of track it also on a monthly basis when we send the data out, and we share this with the board for everybody's awareness. And this information is directly leading to what goes into the Enrichment Recognition List. So on this subject here, as we can see, looking at the last data call, or rather from the period of time from September 9th to October 7th, you see we're tracking total CNAs in the data set. We're looking at who's doing all CVSS, who's looking at doing all CWEs as part of their records, both of those things. And then lastly, CPE as well, which we've been recently tracking, which obviously is one that's a little bit different in the sense that until very recently, or I should say until very soon, it's been rather tricky to do that in a useful way for the entire community. But again, Megazone and Chris Goffin will be talking about that a little bit later today. One of the other things that we can look at is that since April, when we started this initiative, we've seen some tremendous adoption of this, right? So you'll notice that obviously the CNA community is always growing. So it's gone up by 43 since April 24th to the 7th of October. But you can also see that we've got more than 24 entities that are doing both CVSS and CWE, or individually as well. And then lastly, there's a couple organizations that are really taking upon themselves to be leaders in the CPE space, at least helping us figure out what might be possible in the CVE record, in addition to community engagement working groups like the QWG that are really trying to find a useful way for this. Importantly, as you can see at the bottom, the CNA Enrichment Recognition List in October 7th had 217 CNAs on it, which is really exciting. community couldn't be more happy about this. Really, this was an experiment to say, hey, if you're able to do this, right, will you do it? And the CNAs have shown that they are more than willing and taken that initiative on, which I think is the benefit for the entire community and certainly the CVE program. So as I wrap up this first part of my talk, as I've got two sort of talks back to back, I wanted to just say that if you have started already as part of your CNA operations, routinely enriching your records, thank you, right? It's really important. I think that doing that is to the benefit of everyone, as I said, and thank you. CNAs, as our through line thesis, is that they are the best positioned, generally speaking, to provide accurate, precise, and timely CVE record data enrichment. And lastly, a quick plug for Lisa Olson's talk tomorrow. I think it's in the early stages of the day. There'll be plenty more examples and insights and details, and she'll be talking about that tomorrow as well. It looks like I've got answered questions, so no worries there. I don't see any hands up.